Thanks for joining us today. Today we're talking about financial tools for nonprofits. Stay tuned. You're listening to Financial Sense, Arizona's financial podcast that gives you insights that you can only get from a friend in the business. Recorded and brought to you by National Bank of Arizona, the only bank you need. Today we're talking about nonprofit organizations and financial tools and resources that can help them. Today we have Pam Keefe, Vice President, Nonprofit Relationship Manager here at National Bank of Arizona, and Melissa Steimer, CEO of Gabriel's Angels, a nonprofit organization whose mission is to enhance the social and emotional development of vulnerable children through the life-changing power of pet therapy.
Thank you. Great to be here.
As you know, we like to give insights to viewers that they could only get from having a friend in the business. With that, let's jump right in. Let's start with Melissa.
Yes.
Melissa, give the listeners a brief overview of Gabriel's Angels and the cause that the organization is serving.
Yeah. Thank you again for having me. And you heard what our mission statement was, but we also have a guiding philosophy that the unconditional love of a pet can heal a child. And that's really what we're all about. We started back in 2000. We're a 23-year-old nonprofit organization here serving both Maricopa County and Pima County. We do that with volunteer pet therapy teams. So someone who has a dog that gets certified to be a therapy dog, and then they go out and volunteer. We have over 100 volunteers, and they're in about 75 different Title I schools, nonprofit partner agencies, and they provide these programs free. And we are so thankful that the community supports us so that these volunteers can go out and help these children.
Yeah, that's just a great mission.
Thanks.
Full disclosure, I am on the board of Gabriel's Angels, and
we're so thankful to have you.
And a huge fan. I'm relatively new. I'm having so much early fun and can't wait to be a part of the team and the board and help. And also, full disclosure, my best friend Charlie.
Yeah.
And my spouse, Michelle, we're going to be joining, hopefully, as a pet therapy team here. So
it's going to be so great to have you involved in so many different ways, and you'll see the impact you're going to make. It's
Can't
great.
wait.
Yep.
And Pam, tell us a little bit about your position here at National Bank of Arizona.
Sure, I'd be happy to. But I also wanted to note something about nonprofit organizations. They have contributed over $1.4 trillion to our U.S. economy. And locally here in Arizona, it was over $10 billion. So they're a very vital part of our community and so important. So what I do for National Bank of Arizona is I help nonprofit organizations with their banking needs. I assist them with connecting them with others and assist with creating channels that we can advocate for them and benefit, such as our Taste of the Biltmore event and our Elevate AZ magazine.
Oh, that's great. And remind me, how long have you been with the bank?
21 years last week.
Amazing.
That's
Yes.
amazing.
She has a lot of relationships in this community. I know everybody as a nonprofit knows her and appreciates having you to be, the support for
Thank
us. There are over 28,000 nonprofits in Arizona, so you have a lot of work.
I know. My work is cut
connected
out
with a
for
lot
me.
of organizations. I know,
Yes.
28,000.
So we're speaking about nonprofits, and an important designation in that is the 501c3.
Yep.
So designation. So Melissa, tell the listeners a little bit about what that means, what it takes.
Yep. It really, at the end of the day, there are certain conditions that need to be met to be exempt from paying federal taxes. And it's considered a public charity if you're a 501c3. Some of the important things to be able to get designated is, of course, you have to have a name, you have to have a mission, you have to pull together a volunteer board of directors and officers. That's really important that they're volunteers. You have to create your bylaws, how that nonprofit is going to run and serve those in the community. And then you've got to apply for the tax exempt status. There's a federal form you apply for. Then you have to register with your state. If you're a national nonprofit, you've got to make sure if you're fundraising in all those states that you register in all of those states. So those are some of the things to do to get a nonprofit up and going.
And I think making sure you have the right people in place to carry out your mission.
Yep, absolutely.
That they're dedicated and committed to that mission. Yeah.
So the 501c3 effectively allows you to not have to pay federal income tax.
Yep.
Is that for state as well?
No, you have to do state
Okay.
taxes and stuff, but it's more for the federal taxes. I will also say that they say 501c3 and not for profit can be two
Right.
of the same words, but really at the end of the day, a nonprofit does make a profit, and you
Right.
want a nonprofit because
Right.
you got to put that money
Right.
back. The biggest difference is it's not going to a particular shareholder or an individual, and that's where the community good comes, and the impact in the community is you're putting all of that money back into your mission.
Makes
Right.
sense.
Yeah, so no ownership, more owned by the community.
Yeah. Yep.
Right. So, there's a lot of really good companies today that are socially conscious, that are doing some incredible things with returning some of their profits to some of their needed areas. But there's a difference. There's still a difference. Pam, you want to kind of take a shot at what makes a difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit firm?
Sure. So I will say first, I think a nonprofit is solely for our society's needs, where they don't have owners. The community actually owns the nonprofit.
Yeah, I would just say, exactly what you said. All that money that is donated and given to these community nonprofits go right back into that mission, whereas a for-profit is really about profit for a company. Now, I would say, you mentioned this, Brent, there are so many companies out there that are growing what they call their corporate social responsibility. And I think it's almost, you want to have that as a company. You want to show that you care about the community and that you're willing to give some of your proceeds. I'll share that there's about $500 billion that's given in this country, in the U.S. every year. About 6% of that is from corporations. We'd love to see more, but 6% of companies out there really value giving back and helping a nonprofit. So the difference just is where that money goes and how it's used.
I think our next generation too is wanting to work for a company that is involved in our community. They want to purchase a product from a company that is giving
gives
back to
Yeah.
the community. It's part of their value system. So
Yeah,
it is.
excellent
It
point.
is
It's not just the workers. It's the it's the consumers
Yeah.
who
right.
are interested in that.
Various brands that people will go to because of that give back or support of community needs.
Right.
Yeah. Many more you see that are coming
Yeah.
up. Yeah.
So really, it's a tool. It's tools in the toolbox
Yeah.
for serving our communities.
Sure.
Both for profit and nonprofit have or not for profit have their roles, and I think that's a really excellent designation.
Yep.
So, Melissa, this question is I want you to take a shot at it first. And what are some of the challenges that nonprofits have when managing their financials, their situation? I think I know the answer, but
Do you want to take a guess? No. And you being on the board, of course, are starting to understand that with a nonprofit of our size. But for us, is cash flow. Right. So, a great example of this is we're in the summer months. We mainly serve schools. We serve other nonprofit agencies, but our volunteers, not a lot of them are working in the summer. We're not heavily out there being able to say, can you help us this summer provide for kids? And so our fundraising is down. And not until you get into the fall and we have that big event do you start to get that cash back and be able to use it. So it's a real challenge with how the cash flow is. And so you have to be smart about it because you've got expenses that are constantly going out the door regardless.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Pam, go ahead.
I think you're spread thin.
Yes.
And it's just
Yes.
having these funding sources coming from all different directions. And then when like the summer months hit, people might be going out of town or might be cutting back. And so you're having to make up for that in another area. So it's always trying to juggle all of these things.
I would also say, a lot of I've worked in nonprofit all of my career, and sometimes those restrictions on funding. We would much prefer that most of those dollars are unrestricted and flexible, and the more that can happen. But, sometimes it doesn't. There are a lot of grant makers, foundations out there that are very clear about how they want to give, what they want to give to, and it can be a challenge for a nonprofit to not be able to use it in ways in that moment they need to use it.
So that's a really good point. So restricted versus unrestricted. Some of your funds are restricted. It's great. Takes care of that particular need.
Right.
But as a CEO of an organization,
Right.
there may be, multiple needs.
Yep.
And if you can't use that cash or cash flow
Yep.
for some of these other needs, that really, it's not completely unimportant,
Yep.
the restricted, but it's just very restricted.
Yep. The other thing I think that is a challenge over what a for-profit may be able to do because is to have that capital and to be able to grow and to be able to, because if we need the capital, because a lot of times that all the money that you have is going right back into your mission and is very clearly laid out in a budget. Most, organizations at the end of the year may see, oh, we had a really good fundraising year, so we have extra dollars, but you usually are spending all of your dollars for that year in some particular way or another. So if you really need to put some cash somewhere to grow, you've got to go out and raise that separately and do some kind of campaign. Whereas a for-profit may have the availability to pull that money in many different ways and use it to grow pretty quickly.
Pam, and so we kind of talked about cash flow. What are some other needs that you see that kind of go across a lot of nonprofits? What are some of the needs that you see?
Well, number one, fraud is running rampant right now. It's everywhere. And so the first thing when we review someone's accounts to make sure, do you have a fraud protection tool in place? Because I highly recommend it. So I always let every organization know about that.
So positive pay.
Yes, what we call positive
National Bank
pay,
of Arizona
fraud
offers.
prevention tool. So secondly, most nonprofit organizations have a credit card.
Right.
And so we have a credit card here that you can earn revenue share back at the end of the year. It's not points, it's cash. And so it's adding more revenue to the bottom line every
Terrific.
year. So with many of our nonprofit clients, I try to guide them through the process and be a dedicated banker to them to let them know all the different ins and outs of our products and why they should have them.
Yeah, that's why your experience in this industry is so important.
We as a nonprofit rely on that knowledge and experience from you. It helps us. Not all of us are financial savvy, so at a nonprofit, so it's important to have.
In your experience, what are some of the accounts, what are some of those other needs and challenges that nonprofits can have when they're talking and working with banks?
Sure, Brent, that's a great question. So one of the struggles with underwriting a line of credit or a credit card is cash flow. There is no ownership for a nonprofit, so it's cash flow that is always an issue. So it's nice because we have underwriters that have worked with nonprofits over the years.
So in a nonprofit, of course, there's no guarantors, there's no owners.
There's no owners,
so you don't have that
guarantors.
Support.
We don't have that support. So
I suspect collateral's probably generally kind of thin to non-existent.
Right. So when it's a unsecured line of credit, and a commercial card, let's just say it is unsecured credit. So
so that goes to why you spend so much time focusing on cash on hand.
Yes, absolutely.
And the cash flow and the funding sources, because if that misses a beat,
not
only, maybe you don't cover overhead, make payroll, pay rent, but when you have a future need going to the bank, they're going to go, look, this last year, you were good, but the year before that, you were terrible. Yeah. That's very hard for a bank to underwrite.
And I think that's why it's so important for nonprofits to really build up some reserves. Like anything, anybody should have that 6-month, 9-month reserve. And we try to do our best to do that. But when you have to even start dipping into that, you're really we try to just keep that over, to the side because we want to use it at a time when we really need to put some cash in to help our mission and not have to use it on just the daily expenses.
Financial discipline, it's incredible just how important it is, but it's really everything for nonprofit.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good point. So Pam, in your experience, what are the top 5 services that nonprofits are looking for when they come and talk to you?
Well, first of all, it's having a dedicated account for a nonprofit organization. We created those years ago when we started nonprofit banking 17 plus years ago. And so other than that, fraud prevention is number 1.
Critical.
Number 2, just having different efficiencies from your day-to-day operations through whatever that might be. ACH, putting that in place.
What's ACH stand for? Just
automatic clearinghouse. So it's basically having ACH for payroll or, other vendor payments.
Sure.
And then, of course, having a credit card
Right.
and using that card to pay your vendors, of which you earn more revenue share back at the end of the year. So just strategically going in and figuring out ways that everything runs more efficiently.
You talked about the consortium card a little earlier. Can you talk a little more about that particular service?
Sure. So it's a consortium commercial card that is dedicated for nonprofit organizations. So instead of earning points back, you earn a revenue share back at the end of the year. And it's cash going back into the account. And so rather than using your credit card for just the typical credit card things, we try to get them to use the card for vendor payments. And it just adds more value to them at the end of the year. And it's more efficient for them general.
That makes sense. So, Melissa, what would you consider kind of the greatest service of what you've experienced with National Bank of Arizona?
The greatest service for me from day one, since being in this position, is having the relationship with Pam. We really value connecting with each other, and she's also been so helpful in just connecting out in the community because she is really working with so many nonprofits. And anytime I need to talk to her, she wants to share something about what we're doing and how we can be further helped by National Bank of Arizona, you're always there. And in fact, there are many times I have texted her and staff that have worked under her, and they have been great and have gotten back so quickly.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
I've always said relationships are our biggest wealth. And if you think about it, that is so true. So I know with yourself and other nonprofit organizations, I try to connect them to others with similar missions. And I met one just the other day, which would be a great addition, I think, to Gabriel's Angels, and we'll talk about that offline.
Love to hear it.
But when you're out there in the community, you hear of so many different missions. And sometimes you hear of a mission that really would be a great added value to another organization. So I just try to make connections like that. And that's where I set myself apart.
So Pam, can you share a little bit more kind of about National Bank of Arizona's involvement and support?
So in 2022, National Bank of Arizona supported over 180 organizations and over 173 associates. We've volunteered over 5,400 hours.
Wow.
It's amazing.
So yes, it is amazing. And in addition to that, National Bank of Arizona donated $1.2 million in 2022 alone. For the size of our bank, that's really relevant number. And so very happy to work for a bank that's so dedicated to our community.
Well, I can tell you, you've been here 21 years. I've been here 20 years, and supporting our community via volunteer and any way we can actively engage is an absolute core value of who we are, and we talk about it often.
It is who we are, and we're actively doing it every day.
So I want to talk a little bit about community volunteering and serving on boards. Here at National Bank of Arizona, we actively encourage our bankers and associates to serve on boards. What insights and directions would you kind of give those who have the experience to lend to nonprofits and serve on different boards?
So number one, I would say make sure you have the passion for the mission. Don't just sit on a board to sit on a board. Make sure it's coming from your heart.
Right.
And make sure you're dedicated and committed. And I would also add to make sure you know what the expectations are of the board. And those are all really important and very relevant.
Right. So let's say I want to join an organization and I want to give back. I'm not sure what that means. I'm not sure if that means, volunteering or in the actual act or what that organization does. It might be on a board, might be on a committee. I don't know. So Melissa, where would you kind of direct me?
Yep. So first of all, I think you as a person who may not have heard of us or know much about us, connecting with others within your network and understanding what boards they serve on and what that meant for them. And I know you personally did that with someone who was involved with us. And when she thought of you and thought about connecting you, that's how that conversation started. I think we see a lot of board members come in from people saying, gosh, here's someone who really likes your mission and wants to help and support in any way. And then we'll sit down and have a conversation on the best way that can be for you. I would also say, and add to what Pam said earlier about being on a board and having the passion is number one as well in my books. But, if you can't start on a board, because that's you have a fiduciary and legal ability, and you have to be able to understand what that organization, where they're at, what they're going through in their financials. And if you can't do that yet, then plug into one of our committees. We have a finance committee, a development committee. If there's certain areas and skills you think you can lend, maybe start there. And it's for both of us. You can kind of test the waters and see, do you want to, play a role in a bigger way?
Well said.
That's a very good point. Volunteering too for the organization, maybe just to start as well. I know I get a lot of associates coming to me that they say, I want to sit on a board. I'm like, well, my first question is, what are you passionate about?
Yeah.
What are you really passionate about? And I use also the resources for Alliance of Arizona Nonprofits and Arizona Community Foundation.
Yep.
They're
And
really
I'll
good
add,
resources.
I would also add, Pam, that Arizona State University, the Lodestar, they're really set up for all things nonprofit.
Yeah.
And they have a board where organizations like us go in and actually list where we need board members. And so you can go even start there and see if one of them listed on there is ideal for you. And then you can go through their system and, that organization will connect with you and follow up.
Yeah, good point.
Are there a lot of open board positions and needs in the nonprofit community here in Arizona? I'll ask that to both.
Yeah. Well, as I started earlier, there are 28,000 nonprofits in Arizona. So if that doesn't give you a number, each one of them have a board. They're all different sizes. And yes, there is always a need. And I think some people will always lean into, well, what skills do we need? I think it's always important to be clear about having someone, legal, having a financial person. Sometimes like us, we don't have an HR department.
Right.
So having someone who understands that role is great. But it's also, I think, important for that potential board member to ask the organization, what phase of the organization are you in? What life cycle, they call it, are you in? Because like us, we're kind of a 23-year-old startup. We're reinventing what this organization is. We may need more people with that marketing background and the entrepreneurial sense and people who can connect in the community. So sometimes the skills aren't always cut and dry of we need this, this, and this. There are some that I think any nonprofit is always going to look for, but they just want passionate community advocates that really love what they're doing and will be an extension of that.
Yeah, really well said.
Right.
Pam?
I would say also that when you have a new board member come on board and they have a certain skill set, you want them to share that, not to just sit there, right?
Absolutely engage.
Make sure you engage. And I think I've heard that in some cases where sometimes somebody joins a board just to join a board and they just don't really share and they don't really let everyone know what they're good at or what their experiences are.
We've talked a lot about nonprofit and the sense of community, and you two both live it. And it's something that's incredibly inspiring for me. One of the things that I would like to leave, and I'll give everybody a chance just to kind of leave a final thought here for our listeners. But the most important thing that I've seen in my life's experience is the willingness to show up. And I think if everybody can kind of take that mindset from an individual standpoint, what a much stronger community will be. Melissa, final thoughts?
Well, my final thought, because I always love quotes and I love ending with them, and I really feel like I've lived by this one being in the nonprofit space, but we make a living by what we get, but we make a life by what we give, and that's Winston Churchill. I mean, it's one that I'm very guided by and means a lot to this conversation today.
I love it.
Mine would just be get involved, get inspired, and be a force for good.
Yeah, love it. Melissa, I want to thank you so much for giving your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And Pam, as always, you provide such an incredible service for the bank. I've seen you in action for years. You do an incredible job, and I want to thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
Means a lot.
So that's it for this episode of Financial Sense. Don't forget to like and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform and YouTube.